Your Virtual Companion, a Good Omens fanfiction, written by AppleSeeds, read aloud by SkyAsimaru. If you enjoy this podfic, you can check out the original story on Archive of Our Own. If you would like to hear more of my recordings or see some of my own work, you can find me through the pen and screen name of SkyAsimaru. Your Virtual Companion. Summary. In an apocalyptic world full of famine, pestilence, war, pollution, and death, where contact between humans has been outlawed to try to contain the spread of a deadly pathogen, Crowley embarks on a series of appointments with a virtual live companion named Aziraphale, a hologram designed to enhance psychological well-being by means of realistic interaction. Over the course of his appointments, Crowley develops a deep affection for the hologram and begins to wonder how far he might be able to take their companionship. Chapter 1. The Ocean. Payment confirmed. The disconcertingly eerie computer voice echoed around the small, stark, white reception booth. Thank you for choosing Eden. Please proceed to room 3, where your companion will meet you. Crowley took a deep breath and reflexively glanced over his shoulder to check he was alone before stepping back out of the booth. Old habits apparently do die hard. There was no chance of actually seeing anyone, ever. That was kind of the point. Crowley proceeded along the brightly illuminated corridor, pressing his sunglasses more tightly against his face, and let out a shaky breath when he reached the door with 3 on the digital display beside it.
It's just a computer,
Crowley reassured himself before tremulously pushing the green button to open the door. It swished open and Crowley stepped inside. The room was small and the walls comprised floor-to-ceiling screens that were currently displaying an underwater scene. Clearly artificial, not even a single piece of plastic in sight. The door closed behind him, and with a slight flicker, a projection of a man, well, a hologram with the appearance of a man, appeared in front of him and smiled. Crowley's gut twisted. Hello, welcome to Eden. My name is Aziraphale. I will be your companion. How would you like me to address you? The regret hit Crowley instantly, like a forceful slap in the face. This was a stupid idea. Fuck knows he already spent enough time interacting with computers. What had he actually thought this would achieve? Did he really think talking to this computer, just because it came with a realistic holographic projection that made it look human, would do anything to alleviate the crippling loneliness that had dug its claws into his chest so deeply they'd seemingly fused with his ribcage? He stared at the hologram for a moment. At least he didn't have to worry about offending it. And it just looked back at him expectantly, with an unfaltering smile.
Crowley,
he replied, to get the thing to stop just looking at him and start talking again. He could leave at any time, he reminded himself. It didn't have to be right now. He'd paid for the hour. Maybe it was worth giving it a fair chance. Hello, Crowley. It's very nice to meet you. Are you happy with this choice of background, or would you like to select something else? the hologram asked, gesturing to the screens cladding the walls. Many people find the sight of the ocean calming, but there are 358 different backgrounds to choose from.
People find the sight of the fake ocean calming, maybe. It's not like anyone in their right mind would actually go diving in the real ocean right now, is it?
Would you like me to list the categories from which you can choose an alternative background?
Nah, it's fine. Stick with the fake pristine ocean. Shove a couple of whales in it as well, why don't you? Pretend they're not all gone too. Let's just keep acting like everything's fine, eh? Sounds great.
Could you please clarify whether you would like me to update the background to include marine wildlife?
Oh, fucking hell. This was a mistake,
Crowley muttered under his breath, pinching the bridge of his nose between his thumb and forefinger.
No. Stick with the empty void of the dead ocean. Like you say, it's calming.
Crowley wondered whether the hologram would be capable of picking up on the sarcasm. It appeared not, as it smiled and continued to address him brightly. You can ask me at any time if you would like to modify any other settings in the room. I can adjust the temperature, illumination levels, and background scenery. Would you like to take a seat? The hologram gestured to a bright white egg-shaped chair with a plump black cushion on it. There were 2 of them, side by side. Apparently the projection was going to pretend to sit with him.
Sure.
Crowley hesitantly lowered himself down onto the chair, and, as predicted, the hologram mirrored his behavior, immediately coming to join him. What would you like to talk about today?
Shall we talk about how the fact that I'm even here, that I even considered doing this, shows how completely and royally screwed we are?
We can talk about anything you like.
Anything?
Anything permitted within Eden's guidelines for sessions with a live companion. Crowley hadn't actually read the guidelines that had been automatically downloaded for him when he'd booked this appointment. He found himself slightly curious about what topics might be off limits. Organizing an uprising was almost certainly one of them. Maybe smuggling soil across the district borders and setting fire to effigies of their political leaders. Couldn't allow people to develop ideas about things like that now, could they? Crowley absently wondered whether those who ran Eden belonged to that contemptible collection of people who were actually benefiting from maintaining the status quo. An unpleasant prickling manifesting in his gut as he thought about how much money he'd given them for this appointment.
What about talking about how we are totally fucked and everything is hopeless? Is that permitted under the guidelines?
It might not be the best choice of topic to enhance your psychological well-being, but yes, it is, the hologram replied, without missing a beat. Probably a popular topic, to be fair.
Terrific. Let's talk about that, then. What do you think about everything that's going on? Completely hopeless, or is there a chance we'll make it out of this?
There are many factors involved that could affect the outcome.
Obviously, yeah. But I'm curious what you think. What's the most likely scenario? I have to say, my money's on totally fucked.
I think that humanity will survive.
Okay, yeah, probably. How many of us, though? Already down to 4 billion?
It's difficult to say.
Jesus Christ,
Crowley grumbled to himself, sweeping his hand through his hair.
Look, you're supposed to talk to me, keep me company, right? And I want to talk about how fucked we are. So tell me what you think's going to happen. How many of us do you think will be left when this is all over?
The hologram appeared to give this some thought. I would estimate somewhere in the region of 2 billion.
Really? Bit optimistic, but okay, good for you. Not that you've got any reason to worry. I'm sure your program will be just fine on a storage drive somewhere, even after we've all starved to death or succumbed to the dreaded you-know-what.
Crowley said facetiously, with a mirthless chuckle.
I suppose you've heard they've implemented quarantine orders again. I don't know why they bothered lifting them at all, to be honest. I reckon that was the last time, though. This is it now.
That seems likely, yes, Aziraphale responded, with an appropriately subdued tone of voice.
So, what makes you say 2 billion?
There's still enough uncontaminated agricultural land to sustainably feed that many people.
Yeah, true, but it doesn't work that way, does it? The people with power, you think they'll be content with just enough for themselves? Fertilizer supply situation's just gonna get worse too.
Well, I hope that a solution will be found.
Hope? Yeah. I vaguely remember what that feels like.
Crowley sighed and leaned back in his chair, studying the hologram for a moment, wondering whether it had been specially programmed to be optimistic, but not quite annoyingly so. A Goldilocks zone balancing the reality of the situation with just enough hope to provide reassurance. The perfect balance to tempt a client to come back for more. There is always hope, Crowley.
Yeah, course, right up until there isn't.
I'm sorry. I know that things are very bleak right now. Is there anything I can do to help?
You tell me.
Well, I can try to offer comfort and reassurance, or I can try to take your mind off it by talking about something else. Is there anything else you would like to talk about, Crowley? Receiving comfort and reassurance, whatever the hell that would look like, from a computer program, would only add to the dystopian nature of Crowley's recent experience. So he glanced around the room, instinctively seeking inspiration for something to talk about. He was confronted with nothing but the illusion of the vast, lifeless ocean. The rippling blue light from the screens dancing across the bright white floor, and the hologram sitting across from him.
Why don't you tell me about yourself?
Crowley ventured, wondering whether the projection would have a standard response for a question like that. I am Aziraphale, one of Eden's live companions. My first session here was just over 2 years ago. My favorite background is the patisserie.
The patisserie?
Yes, I like looking at all the cakes. They look scrummy. Crowley couldn't help but laugh. He didn't want to, and even fought against it, like he was trying to prove a point to himself that this wouldn't work, that it was all just bullshit, that there was nothing a computer program could do to make any of the apocalyptic nightmare he was living through seem more bearable. But that wasn't what he wanted, was it? Not really, surely. If this hologram could make him laugh, maybe get his brain to pump out some serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins, then it was probably in his best interests to just go with it, right?
Fair enough,
Crowley said with a shrug, an amused grin lingering on his face as he fought against the resistance clawing at him from the inside.
Your name's pretty unusual. Do you know what made them choose it? Does it have some kind of special meaning?
Aziraphale is the name of an angel. Crowley let his gaze drift over the hologram, focusing on its fluffy white blonde curls and rounded cheeks.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. It's a good fit for you. Are all the companions named after angels? Got a Gabriel and a Michael I could chat to as well, have you?
I'm afraid I don't possess information about other companions. However, you are able to browse a catalogue on the Eden website, or at a terminal in one of the reception booths if you would prefer to book an appointment with a different companion.
I know, that's not why I asked. More than happy with you, Angel.
The hologram smiled, as though that actually pleased it. It wasn't really anything like Crowley had expected, not that he'd been entirely sure what to expect. Aziraphale was prim and proper. He spoke and dressed quite formally, his attire reminiscent of an older, simpler time, right down to an actual tartan bow tie, lending him an air of incongruity in this stark, hollow, revoltingly modern space. Crowley had used to go in for the sleek, minimalist, modern look, but recently it had begun to lose its appeal. His heart was empty enough, and for the first time in his life he'd begun craving something else, something cozier, something he knew he could never have.
So,
Crowley ventured, racking his brain for something to say.
What do you do if someone comes in here and you say, "What would you like to talk about?" And they say, "I don't know, you choose." Do you just start talking about random things?
Most people do have particular things they would like to discuss, but I am capable of initiating conversations about a wide range of different topics.
Yeah? What's your favourite?
The hologram paused for a moment, as if in thought, as if everything it did and said wasn't determined before Crowley had even finished speaking. Literature, it said brightly.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry, that's not going to work. Got a second choice?
I'd like to talk about whatever you'd like to talk about, Crowley. This is your appointment, and my purpose is to try to enhance your well-being.
Yeah, well, I don't really know what I want to talk about. You know, I can't even remember the last time I actually talked to someone. Except for myself, of course. Used to talk to my plants too, but they've gone now, obviously.
Oh, were they taken during the soil seizure?
Yep.
Crowley blew out a long breath.
What a fucking nightmare, eh? 2 billion? Sorry, Angel. I just don't see it.
Human beings are very resilient.
Maybe.
Crowley leaned back, narrowing his eyes and watching the hologram sitting neatly in the chair, hands clasped together in its lap, leaning forward slightly as if it was actually interested in hearing what he had to say.
Well, you know what? If you want to give me a 50-50 shot, then I'll happily take it. Thanks, Angel.
That made the hologram smile again. Crowley breathed out a laugh, shook his head, and restrained the urge to roll his eyes.
For the record, I didn't really used to talk to my plants, you know.
I wouldn't have judged you if you did.
Good, because I actually used to scream at them.
Crowley confessed, with a grin on his face. Whatever for? The hologram looked a little scandalized, which made Crowley smirk. He shrugged his shoulders.
Makes 'em grow better.
Really?
Yep.
Well, I never knew that. Crowley laughed again. It felt strange and sluggish, like trying to speak for the first time upon waking from a coma.
Glad I could enlighten you.
Is it because of the carbon dioxide you exhale?
No idea, but I swear to you, it definitely works.
The hologram nodded thoughtfully, and a moment of silence passed between them. In the end, Aziraphale was the one to break it. Was there anything you were thinking you might like to talk about when you booked this appointment?
Not really. Nothing specific.
May I ask what prompted you to book a session with a companion?
Sure, I guess. I just had this, feeling, you know? Like when you know something's not right, when everything inside of you is screaming that something's wrong, that you're not meant to live like this, you know? It's just a visceral thing. I don't really know how to explain. It's just so fucked up the way we live now, if you can even call it that. People aren't meant to be alone all the time. I'm screwed either way, so I don't know, really. Guess I just thought it might take the edge off.
I understand. And you are quite right. It is important for your well-being to spend time talking with someone. Are you enjoying your session so far?
Sure, yeah, it's fine. I'm fine. How about you?
I'm enjoying talking to you very much.
You have to say that. I could be a total asshole, and I bet you'd still say you were enjoying it.
No, Crowley. My rule is to provide realistic interaction.
So if I said something really horrible about you, you wouldn't just pretend it was okay?
No, and I do hope you believe me, because I would much prefer it if you didn't. A part of him was tempted to experiment. After all, the hologram didn't really have any actual feelings he could hurt. But Crowley couldn't bring himself to do it. He didn't want to see Aziraphale looking sad or offended, even if it was all just an elaborate illusion. The hologram had the kind of face Crowley didn't think he could bear to see in pain. It had probably been designed that way on purpose.
I won't. You seem nice,
Crowley offered as reassurance, which earned him another smile. Thank you.
Hey, why don't you shove some wildlife in the ocean after all?
Of course. One moment, please. Aziraphale's hand moved as though operating invisible controls, and the empty ocean around them became filled with brightly colored corals and fish. A sharp burst of awe shot through Crowley's heart and diffused throughout his chest, bringing tears to his eyes.
Oh, fuck, I miss this.
He rose from his chair and approached one of the panels, hovering his hand over a clownfish zipping in and out of the protective tentacles of an anemone. You have an interest in the ocean?
It's not really an interest, Angel. It's amazing, don't you think? All this diversity of life. I see things like this and it really makes me wonder. I mean, there's no hope for us if we could look at something like this and just shrug our shoulders and decide it was something we could afford to lose, right?
Aziraphale stood up and crossed the small space to join him in front of the screen. Did you ever see anything like this? Before, I mean.
Yeah, went on a glass-bottomed boat a few times. That was incredible. Saw all the little octopuses and lobsters, sea cauliflowers and stuff. It was amazing, like entering another world.
What's that? Crowley asked, half to himself, squinting as a shape appeared in the apparent distance. As it swam towards them, Crowley was able to identify it as a Pacific white-sided dolphin.
I've never seen one of those before. I saw bottlenose dolphins once, and that's the only species I ever got to see for real.
Do you like dolphins?
Yeah, I do.
Aziraphale's hand moved again, and the single dolphin was almost immediately joined by an entire pod of its brethren. Crowley turned away from the screen and found the hologram smiling at him again, as though its only purpose was to make him happy. Crowley supposed it was.
Thanks.
The hologram bowed its head slightly. Are dolphins your favorite kind of fish, Crowley? Crowley blinked, taken aback.
I'm sorry, what did you just ask me?
He asked, once again unable to suppress his laughter. Are dolphins your favorite kind of fish?
You're joking, right?
The hologram shook its head.
How could you? They're mammals, Angel, not fish.
Oh, right. My apologies. Crowley grinned.
But you know that. You probably know everything there is to know about everything. This part of the realistic interaction experience, asking stupid questions.
Crowley's tone was light, almost teasing, really, as ridiculous as that was. But Aziraphale's bottom lip jutted out in a pout, the hologram's head hanging down as though it was actually feeling hurt or embarrassed. It didn't matter how impossible that was. Crowley hated it, his stomach lurching and a lump forming in the back of his throat. I'm sorry, Crowley.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it in a bad way. I was just kidding, really. I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't bother trying to be funny. I'm really out of practice. Forgive me?
It's all right. There's nothing to forgive. A heaviness settled in Crowley's gut. Maybe this was too realistic.
I am sorry, though, Angel. I promise I didn't mean it as a bad thing. It's nice that you don't know everything about everything. It means maybe I could teach you some stuff, right?
I'd enjoy that very much.
Perfect. And maybe you can teach me some stuff too, yeah?
If you'd like.
Sure, and that'd be great. Can you stick a shark up there too?
A reef shark appeared almost immediately.
Right, easy little tip to tell them apart. You see how the shark's fin moves side to side when it swims? The dolphin's moves up and down. Same for whales and porpoises too, and manatees and dugongs, he added, although that felt a bit like talking about how a unicorn would run or a dragon would fly. They might as well have just been mythical creatures at this point. And the shark has gills, but the dolphins keep going up to the surface to breathe, see?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
It's okay.
Aziraphale no longer looked upset, but the hologram was still lacking a little of the warmth and vibrancy it had displayed before. Crowley was desperate to try to lift the mood.
So, do you know any good jokes?
Of course.
Okay, great. Go on then. Tell me one.
All right. The hologram thought for a moment, nibbling on its bottom lip. Why should you be suspicious of staircases?
I don't know. Why?
Because they're always up to something. Crowley laughed, and this time he laughed hard. He laughed so much his cheeks and his ribs ached. Was he really that starved of human interaction that something so stupid could set him off? That joke wasn't even that funny, was it?
Oh my God, that's terrible,
Crowley panted, wiping his eyes and trying to get his breath back.
But you know what? It's brilliant. You must have access to thousands of jokes. What made you pick that?
I had a feeling you would like it.
Well, I guess I did. Thanks, Angel.
The hologram looked rather pleased with itself.
Hey, what do you feel like?
Crowley reached out and tentatively touched Aziraphale's arm. His hand passed right through it, obviously. I'm a projection. I don't feel like anything.
Sorry, I was curious.
That's all right.
Do you like doing this?
Doing what?
This,
Crowley repeated, gesturing between them and then vaguely at the small space around them. Empty save for the two egg-shaped chairs.
Being a companion,
he clarified. I like talking to people.
Well, that's good then. I bet people tell you all sorts of stuff. Got any juicy gossip you can share with me?
I'm not permitted to discuss my other clients.
Okay, fair enough. I bet you follow all the rules, don't you?
Yes, of course.
Makes sense. You are an angel after all,
Crowley drawled, then remembered his intention to stop trying to be funny. It was pointless anyway.
I suppose I'd better not share any gossip with you either. It might get me into trouble.
Oh, I certainly wouldn't want that, the hologram replied sincerely. Crowley squinted and cast his eyes around the corners of the room.
I assume these sessions are recorded?
Yes, there are security cameras in operation that record all sessions that take place with a companion. The footage is stored for 7 days and is only reviewed if required as part of a criminal investigation, or if the companion reports a breach of the guidelines.
7 days isn't very long. It makes me think if you get the slightest hint someone might be doing something they shouldn't, you report it immediately. Am I right?
I am obligated to report any illegal activities that are disclosed by a client. Crowley bristled. It wasn't unexpected, and it was almost certainly in one of the hundreds of lines of small print he hadn't bothered to read when he'd booked this appointment. But it just brought it all back to the front of his mind. How nothing went unmonitored anymore. How nothing was private. They'd done away with cash and paper records, introduced identity codes that were linked to every fucking thing you ever did. And people just acted like it was fine and normal, like it didn't matter as long as you had nothing to hide. But it was creepy and insidious. And now here was Crowley planning to... what? Open up to a computer program? Share the only thing that was still private? His thoughts? Not knowing what information might be extracted and stored from it. Would he suddenly encounter targeted advertising focusing on things he'd only told Aziraphale he was interested in?
Would be a good way for Eden to make more money from these sessions, wouldn't it?
Crowley crossed the room and flopped back down into the egg-shaped chair. Time to do a little experiment.
These chairs are pretty nice. I might get one for home.
Really? Aziraphale asked, sitting down beside him again. Crowley felt painfully sure he'd receive a discount code for one of these chairs at some point in the next few days. If he did, he decided, he definitely wouldn't come back.
They look really fancy, but they're actually comfortable too.
I'm glad you're comfortable, Crowley. These chairs are ergonomically designed to support good posture whilst being comfortable for the user.
Mission accomplished. Hey, here's a question. How come you pass through me, but you don't fall through the chair? Or the floor, for that matter?
The positioning of the floor and chair is static and built into the program.
So if I move the chair...
Crowley ventured mischievously. Please don't do that. Crowley chuckled, but Aziraphale actually looked concerned.
Don't look at me like that. I won't, I promise. But just out of interest, if I did, what would happen?
I suppose it would look like I was floating. Crowley's eyes widened, and he smirked. He was so tempted. He'd always been a bit of a prankster when he was younger, especially at work. It was always just silly things, nothing that did any real harm, like putting all the clocks in his office forward an hour, switching around the labels on key rings, putting that foaming stuff into the toilets so it flooded everywhere when someone flushed it. That seemed like a long time ago now, though. With the world in the state it was in, Crowley's life was so devoid of entertainment that he thought he'd actually find it inordinately hilarious to see Aziraphale floating above the space where the chair had been. But the hologram had asked him not to move it, and for some reason Crowley couldn't bring himself to go against its wishes. Please don't move the chair, Aziraphale repeated.
I told you I wouldn't.
Then why are you looking at me like that?
Like what?
I don't know, the hologram said suspiciously, narrowing its eyes. Like you have wicked intentions.
Sorry, Angel. It was just picturing you floating.
Crowley snorted a laugh, trying to contain it.
I guess that'd be appropriate too, eh? Be not afraid.
Aziraphale's face twitched with displeasure, and that really set Crowley off. He burst out laughing and folded over on himself, head between his knees, his whole body quaking. He didn't even try to stop it this time. Aziraphale wasn't real, and it was funny. The idea of the hologram's beige trouser-clad arse just hanging there in mid-air. Another fit of laughter consumed Crowley, and before long his diaphragm and jaw were aching, and he was actively trying to make himself stop, but he couldn't. Aziraphale wasn't saying anything, although Crowley imagined the projection watching him disdainfully. He chanced to glance at it, and found that, in fact, the hologram was watching him with a fond smile on its face, as though Crowley were doing exactly what it wanted. Suddenly, Crowley didn't feel like laughing any more. He sat up, inhaled deeply, and wiped his eyes before releasing the air from his lungs in one long sigh.
God, that felt good. I can't remember the last time I laughed like that.
Laughter is very good for your physiological and psychological well-being.
Yeah, I know. I just don't have much cause to laugh nowadays, you know?
I understand. I'm pleased that you have been able to do so here.
Me too. Thanks, Angel.
Could you, perhaps, teach me more about the other animals visible in this background? It would be useful for me to learn.
Yeah, okay.
Crowley took another deep breath, relishing the sensation of it, his lungs feeling unconstricted and open in a way they hadn't for a long time. He suspected that if Aziraphale really didn't have immediate access to information about everything, which was possible since it would indeed make the interaction more realistic, the hologram could easily have acquired it by other means after their session. But even if it was just a stupid illusion, it was nice for Crowley to share his knowledge, even just to talk about the marine animals and plants for his own benefit, bringing long-neglected information back to the front of his mind. Crowley spent quite a while sharing interesting facts about the wildlife with Aziraphale, and more about his own sightings on the various boat trips he'd taken before the shit had well and truly hit the fan. Forgive me for interrupting you, Crowley, but there are only a few minutes remaining of your allotted appointment time, Aziraphale said politely. Crowley couldn't believe how quickly the time had passed.
Oh, okay. Right, I guess I'd better shut up then.
Thank you for teaching me. I'm very grateful. I found it fascinating.
Sure you did,
Crowley responded sarcastically, unprepared to fool himself into believing the hologram capable of experiencing fascination.
You're welcome, anyway. I enjoyed it.
Have you gained what you wanted from this appointment?
I think so. I guess we'll see how I feel later when I'm back to being alone.
I do hope you'll choose to visit again.
Of course you do,
Crowley said, rubbing his thumb and fingers together in that universally recognized gesture for money. Aziraphale winced. The hologram closed its eyes for a second, and Crowley lamented his cynical nature. Maybe he'd enjoy this more if he just took what Aziraphale said at face value. I'd like to see you again, but I understand that it's expensive.
It's okay. I can afford it. No chance of being able to do the stuff I originally planned to do with my savings, and I can't take it with me, I've had a good time. I might come back. We'll see.
All right. Well, it was lovely to meet you. Take care, Crowley. Good night.
Night. I'd shake your hand, but we've already established how that would go.
The hologram held its hand out towards him, regardless.
Seriously? Okay, if you insist.
Crowley moved as if to shake Aziraphale's hand, and the hologram appeared to enclose his hand with its own, keeping a couple of millimeters between them, presumably to prevent it from passing through Crowley again and spoiling the illusion. In a weird way, it almost felt real. Crowley withdrew his hand and shoved it as far as it would go into his pocket.
See ya, Angel.
I hope so. Goodbye, Crowley. To be continued in Chapter 2. Thank you for reading. Please drop by the archive
and let the author know what you thought of their work.